In today's gospel reading, our Lord tells his disciples that he has not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but rather he has come to fulfill them. And he says, "For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished." So not even a stroke of a letter, even the tiniest aspect of the law is extremely important. Now, why would our Lord need to emphasize this to his disciples? Part of the reason is because it just appears that sometimes our Lord seemed to be breaking the laws, such as the Sabbath laws or not washing his hands before a meal. But these were not the laws of God. These were laws that man had created, the Pharisees. So in regards to the Sabbath, yes, you have to keep the Sabbath holy, but it doesn't mean that you can't rub grain between your hands and eat it. So it's not as if all work is to be avoided on the Sabbath day. So you have to do some work. So our Lord comes to clarify the law, but he reiterates that the law, every aspect of the law, is to remain, and that every aspect of the law is extremely important. And when we consider the law of God, think, for example, the Ten Commandments, the law of God is not something that can change. It's not even possible for it to change. In other words, it's something that is objective. And it's interesting that many atheists reject the idea of an objective moral law. They say it's just subjective. It's whatever you decide it to be. They agree that when people come together, when people live in close proximity, when we have large groups of people in society, there has to be laws to govern society, but those laws are based on a common agreement. And while there is some truth to that we agree on certain laws, the reality is that the law of God is objective. So, for example, understanding that it is wrong to directly kill an innocent human being is always wrong. And that's not something that mankind just decides on their own, but it's something that we know in the depth of our heart. Or we could say that, when we consider marriage, it's always wrong for one of the spouses to commit adultery, or that it's wrong to steal. These are things that we can know naturally. Now, the thief will steal and he thinks it's okay as long as he is not stolen from. But once he is stolen from, he gets angry and he acknowledges that that is wrong. He's upset with that. So we all have this understanding. So God, the way God created us, He created us with the ability to know right and wrong, but also with a sense of justice, to know what is just and what is right when it comes to the law. So the Ten Commandments of God can be known naturally. In other words, if somebody took the time to figure it all out, they would actually come up with the Ten Commandments, including the fact that God has to exist. There's all kinds of evidence for the existence of God, philosophical proof. So one could theoretically derive at the conclusion that there has to be a God. God must exist, and if God exists, then we have to set aside a day to worship Him. We should have a certain amount of days in a week, things like that. Various countries or various peoples have experimented with changing the 7-day work week. So they extended it to 8 days or to 10 days or to 6 days. But they found that 7 works the best, not just because people were used to it, but it just seems to work the best. So it's the way God made us. It's the way God designed us. It's something that is good for us as human beings to rest 1 day of the week. So in regards to the law is objective. And especially when we consider the Ten Commandments. Just a kind of interesting note, keep in mind that when you speak with non-Catholic Christians, their numbering of the Ten Commandments is different. And they have 10 also, we have 10, but they include, so the first commandment is, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have strange gods before me. The second one for us is, do not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. For the non-Catholic Christians, the second commandment is, do not make graven images for the sake of worshiping them. Now, of course, that's part of the first commandment, because it's obvious if we are not to have strange gods before the one true God, well, obviously we cannot make graven images. And when it comes to making graven images, the non-Catholic Christians, they think, well, they can't have any images, which of course is false. So it's kind of like, what if they have a picture on their driver's license? Are they committing a sin because they have an image? What if they use a camera to take pictures? Are they committing sins because they are producing images? Well, according to their beliefs, it would have to be yes. So anyways, they add that second commandment, and what they do at the end, they combine the last two commandments into one commandment. So thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife or thy neighbor's goods. They combine those two into one commandment, whereas we have them separated into two separate commandments. So just keep that in mind when dealing with non-Catholic Christians, if you are ever discussing the commandments. Notice how our Lord points out that whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So teaching the commandments of God is important. I mentioned that if we took the time, we could figure them out, but most people don't have the time. Most people are not philosophers. So we need to be taught. We need to have our conscience properly formed. We need to be taught what is right and what is just. We can easily be led astray by popular opinion or the media. And in fact, some time ago, I was in a doctor's office, and in some doctor's office they have a TV screen and they have various things going. So there was a program on, and it was kind of like a talk show, and it was like very weird, very modern, I guess. But they were talking about sexual things. I think it was about prostitution, and it's like they were expressing their own opinions, and their opinions were wrong. But they kind of disagreed amongst themselves, but eventually they came to a common consensus, and it was the wrong consensus. And there was a young person, waiting also, a young woman, maybe in her 20s, I don't know. But anyways, I was thinking, this poor woman, she probably gets her sense of morality from shows like that. And it's very, very unfortunate. But that's the truth. That's the reality, that a lot of young people today, they don't know what is right and wrong. So we need to get our morality from God, and we need to look to the scriptures. We need to look to the official teachings of the Catholic Church. And notice also, it says that whoever teaches these things will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So parents need to teach their children. They need to educate their children in regards to what is right and just, what the law is, and even in regards to modesty, how people dress. Sometimes I'm surprised, the way young girls dress, and I think their parents allow them to dress that way. Like, don't they know that it's inappropriate and they're going to be attracting the wrong kind of attention if that's the way that they dress? So parents need to teach, but not only parents, priests need to teach. So when it comes to the law of God, the commandments of God, there's two ways in which the law of God can be corrupted. One is that someone will clearly teach against the laws of God and say, oh, premarital sex is okay, or the use of artificial contraceptives is okay, or same-sex marriage is okay, and so on, or abortion is okay. Well, no, these things are not okay. So one way to corrupt the law of God is to directly preach against it, something that is contrary to the law of God. But very often, what tends to happen is that many priests remain silent on the issue of morality. In other words, they don't specify which kinds of activities in society being committed today are sinful. And so what are young people to do? Well, they don't hear it from the church. They don't hear it from their parents. So they hear the wrong message, the false message, from the media and from their peers. And young people are extremely easy to manipulate. You can easily get them to believe things. So you can pull out facts and evidence, and you just present one side of the picture, and you can easily convince them that something must be right because of the reasons that you use. And sometimes they use the reason of empathy and compassion. Oh, well, shouldn't we feel sorry for these individuals? Shouldn't they be allowed to get married also? Well, why don't you talk about what marriage is really all about? What human sexuality is all about? It's not just an expression of love. It's not just something for pleasure. It's something for procreation. And so marriage can only be between a man and a woman who are committed to each other for life. In today's first reading, interestingly enough, it was talking about the law also, and how other nations would marvel that the Jewish people were so prosperous because they had the laws of God. And if you think about it, when we have things like adultery being committed, well, what's going to happen when adultery becomes commonplace? And really, adultery tends to become more prevalent when we have premarital sex, pornography, and the sexualization of the culture. So when we have more cases of adultery, we're also going to have more cases of divorce. Now, did you know that right now there's 50% of marriages ends in divorce? For couples who live together before marriage, it's 75%. So in other words, if you lead a promiscuous lifestyle before marriage, you're much more likely to engage in extramarital affairs after marriage. So it's going to lead to divorce. And that's going to lead to broken homes, children who are deprived of one or the other parent for most of the time, even though they may have visiting privileges. And of course, this is going to affect children psychologically. They're not going to be as capable of being healthy citizens, and that's going to lead to all kinds of other problems. Or if you legalize marijuana, well, it's going to lead to laziness, people slacking off, people becoming addicted to even more heavy-duty drugs, and that's going to impact the workforce. They're not going to be as capable of working in whatever profession they are in, and it's going to cause governments to have more care for them. In other words, to give money to support them because they can't support themselves because they're just not capable psychologically. It's going to lead to greater psychological problems also. So we can see how quickly society will crumble and be affected by all these things. And I just gave two examples. We can talk about murder and theft and cheating and embezzlement and all kinds of things. Human trafficking and sexual abuse and so many other things. We can see how it's going to impact society and the ability of society as a whole to be working efficiently and in a harmonious way. So in other words, if we want our economy to be robust, we need to have good laws in society. I mean, think even the rules of the road. If everybody obeys the rules, then traffic is going to flow smoothly. But when there's an accident, the traffic is backed up, and so many people will end up getting to work late because traffic was backed up because somebody broke the rules of the road. And that's going to affect businesses. I mean, prior to the pandemic, when most businesses were open, their ability to produce, it's going to have an impact on all of that. So every aspect of the law is extremely important, and it does have an impact on all of society. So if we obey the commandments of God, society will flourish. God will bless our societies. All the more reason why we should teach the laws of God to others, because when we break the laws of God, we harm ourselves, we harm others, we harm our relationships with them, and we certainly harm our relationship with God. So let us do what we can to obey the commandments of God to the best of our abilities, but let us also encourage others to do the same, and let us teach them, let us educate them in the ways of what is truly right and just. And it's not just God, giving us these commandments. As I mentioned, we can know even philosophically, we can figure it out on our own, and we have even empirical evidence to support the church's teachings. So it's obvious premarital sex is wrong, committing adultery is wrong, and we can go on and on. We can use empirical evidence to verify that what God teaches, what the Catholic Church teaches, is the truth.